You cannot be serious. Potatoes. In a desert. Now hold on a minute. That sounds completely crackers, doesn't it? Like trying to teach a sheep to drive a lorry. Most sensible people, if you told them this, would simply laugh in your face and, to be fair, you'd probably deserve it. Deserts, you see, are for sand. Lots and lots of sand. They're for scorpions, maybe a lost camel. They are certainly not for growing things. Especially not humble potatoes, which prefer a nice bit of damp soil, not a furnace full of grit. But in China, they looked at the Muas Desert, and someone thought, you know what this place needs? More chips. Let's be clear about this Muas Desert. It's not one of those romantic Lawrence of Arabia deserts. No charming dunes, no picturesque oases. This place was, and in many parts still is, a proper, full-on, hostile environment. Think of the surface of Mars, but with more wind and angrier sand, a truly dreadful place. For centuries, this desert was on the attack. A creeping yellow tide of sand. It swallowed farmland whole, it buried villages, it made life utterly miserable for anyone unlucky enough to live nearby. The Mu'us was winning, make no mistake. The conditions, simply appalling. Summers hot enough to fry an egg on a shovel. Winters cold enough to freeze your thoughts. Growing anything here seemed impossible. Now, the Chinese government, as we know, isn't exactly famous for backing down from a challenge. They built a Great Wall, for crying out loud. A bit of angry sand wasn't going to scare them off. They decided this Muas bully needed to be taught a lesson, a serious long-term lesson. It was time to fight back. So, way back in the 1980s, they started. This wasn't about potatoes yet, not by a long chalk. This was about trying to stop the desert. They began planting trees, millions of them, shrubs, grasses, anything that might take root, anything that might tell the sand, "Oi, you, stop right there." It was a massive undertaking. Imagine trying to hold back the tide with a garden rake. It was a slow, painstaking, grinding battle, years and years of effort with progress measured in tiny green shoots. Then, after years of battling the relentless sand, someone somewhere had an idea. An idea that would change everything. A truly spectacular left-field light bulb moment. The kind of idea that makes you stop and think, could this actually work? Right, they probably said, the sand is slightly less mobile. It's not blowing around as much as it used to. What if we tried to grow potatoes? Yes, potatoes, those humble tubers that have fed civilizations for centuries. Potatoes, in the Muas Desert, a place where nothing but sand and wind seemed to thrive. It must have sounded completely barking, like the ramblings of someone who had spent too much time in the sun. Like suggesting a penguin could win a Formula One race. Utterly preposterous, right? Most agricultural experts would have scoffed. Loudly, they would have dismissed the idea as sheer folly. And for a long time they did. They debated and argued, shaking their heads in disbelief. Potatoes need proper soil, they'd cry. Soil rich in nutrients, not this barren wasteland. They need gentle rain, not this sandy hairdryer. How could anything grow in such harsh conditions? And they would have had a point. The challenges were immense, almost insurmountable. On paper, it was a ridiculous notion, a plan destined for failure. A recipe for dusty, shriveled failure. The kind of failure that would make you question your sanity. But someone, thankfully, wasn't listening to sense. They had a vision, a dream that defied logic. They didn't just give up at the first hurdle. Oh no. These weren't quitters. They were determined to see it through. They picked a small patch of land, a tiny oasis of hope in a sea of sand. Probably the least offensive bit of desert they could find. A place where the sand wasn't quite as hostile. And they decided to give it a whirl, to take a chance on the impossible. This was proper, old-fashioned pioneering spirit. The kind of spirit that built nations and conquered frontiers. Let's just try it and see what happens. Because sometimes, the most extraordinary ideas come from the most unlikely places. Section 5, Operation Tuber Triumph, Unleashing the Potato Power. That first small success, it was like a spark. A tiny, hopeful glimmer in the vast, sandy gloom. A tiny, hopeful glimmer in the vast, sandy gloom. It was a sign that even in the harshest conditions, life could find a way. Someone saw those first plucky potatoes and didn't just say, "Oh, that's nice." They saw potential, a beacon of possibility. They said, "Right, if it works here, let's do it everywhere, full power." This wasn't just a small-scale experiment anymore. This wasn't going to be a cottage industry. This was going to be an agricultural revolution, a transformation of the landscape. This was going to be an agricultural revolution. They envisioned a future where the desert would bloom with life. So they decided to go big. Really, really big. They planned to turn the barren desert into a thriving farmland. We're talking about mobilizing 12,000 farmers. Imagine that. 12,000 people descending upon this barren wasteland. 12,000 people descending upon this barren wasteland, armed not with weapons but with potato seeds, and a whole heap of determination, and a whole heap of determination. It was an army of hope, ready to transform the desert. It was an army of hope. They didn't just scatter seeds and pray for rain. They didn't just scatter seeds and pray for rain. That would have been daft even for them. That would have been daft even for them. No, they brought in the big guns of agricultural science. No, they brought in the big guns of agricultural science. Experts who knew how to make the desert bloom. Clever irrigation systems designed to deliver water drop by precious drop right where it was needed. This was precision farming at its finest. Section 6. From barren lands to bumper harvests, the farmer's revolution. Now think about those 12,000 farmers. Imagine the sheer determination and resilience it took to transform their lives. These weren't city folk looking for a rural adventure. They were deeply rooted in their land, with a profound connection to the soil. These were people whose families had lived on the fringes of this monster for generations. They knew the desert, they knew its cruelty. They had witnessed the harshness of the environment firsthand. They'd seen it swallow their land, their livelihoods, their hopes. The desert was an ever-present threat, a constant reminder of nature's unforgiving power. This was personal for them. It was a battle for survival, for dignity, for a future. Suddenly they had a new weapon, a tool that could turn the tide in their favor, a surprisingly effective one, the humble potato. This resilient crop became a symbol of hope and renewal. And with that weapon came change. Real change. The barren lands began to flourish, and the farmers' hard work started to pay off. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were building something. They were creating a legacy for future generations. They were earning proper money, often for the first time in their lives. This newfound income brought stability and growth to their communities. It was more than just farming. It was a resurrection. A revival of hope and prosperity. Villages that were once shrinking, threatened with extinction by the advancing sands, started to buzz with life again. New houses were built, communities were revitalized, kids went to better schools, education became a priority, opening doors to brighter futures. People could afford healthcare, decent food. The quality of life improved significantly. The social transformation was immense. The farmers' revolution was not just about agriculture. It was about reclaiming their lives and their dignity. Section 7. The nuts and bolts how they pulled off this potato miracle. So how exactly did they do it? Was it some sort of arcane desert magic? Well, not quite, though the results feel pretty magical. It was a potent cocktail of ancient farming wisdom, modern science, and a colossal amount of effort. No shortcuts, just clever thinking and relentless hard graft. Proper problem solving this. First, they had to stop the sand from blowing away. Sounds simple, but it's a nightmare in a desert. They use things called sand stabilizing grids. Imagine giant straw checkerboards laid across the dunes. These grids help to hold the soil, preventing erosion and giving plants a chance. Simple, yet incredibly effective. Sometimes the best ideas are. Then the water, the big one. Deserts, by definition, don't have much. So they used super efficient drip irrigation. Tiny pipes delivering water directly to the roots. No waste. Section 8. The world is watching. Can this sandy solution save us all? Now, when you manage to turn a vast hostile desert into a thriving agricultural zone, people tend to sit up and take notice. especially when those people have their own deserts, droughts and food security problems. And let's be honest, that's quite a few countries. The phone lines to the moose must have been busy. Experts from all over the planet started to visit. Agricultural scientists, government officials, engineers. They came, they saw, and they were, frankly, amazed. How on earth did you do that, they'd ask, probably while wiping sand from their eyes. They took notes, lots of notes. This wasn't just a local success story anymore, it was a global beacon. This Chinese potato project in the Moose Desert offers a massive glimmer of hope. Section 9. The final spud. If they can do this, what can't we do? So what's the big takeaway from this incredible story? This tale of 12,000 farmers, a mountain of sand and an ocean of potatoes? Well, for starters, never ever underestimate the sheer, bloody-minded determination of people when they really put their minds to something, especially when potatoes are involved. It's a powerful combination, but it's more than just a good farming story. It's a powerful lesson in human ingenuity. They were faced with a problem that looked impossible. The desert was too big, too dry, too hostile. Most would have thrown their hands up, but they didn't.